weather to be out here. I know it's cold as can be, and I really appreciate that you guys care enough about your community and care enough about our state to come out today and brave the cold. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on property taxes today, but first I wanted to just very briefly answer a question that I get a lot. And if you were at my kickoff, you've heard this, so please bear with me for 3 minutes. But I get asked a lot, why do you do this? Why are you out in the middle of the municipal elections banging on, 2,000 doors? Why are you, why are you subjecting your business to being protested and all the stuff you take on Facebook? And the reason I do it is because I love Leavenworth. Me and my wife, we came here in 2006. We fell in love with it. We opened a little restaurant that turned into this and a bunch of other restaurants, and COVID kind of scaled back down to 2. But we love Leavenworth. And frankly, Leavenworth's in real trouble. In the last, since 1990, our population has shrunk. And it's only shrunk a couple hundred, which don't sound like a lot, except that's 30 plus years, while the rest of the country and the world is growing. So if you're shrinking while the rest of the state and the country is growing, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And it's not just, a few hundred people doesn't sound like a bunch, but it's who's leaving. It's the people with the money to leave are leaving and going to other cities. Some of them are staying here in Leavenworth County, but a lot of them are leaving the state because we're pricing them out of the state. And when the money leaves and the people leave, the services leave. We've already lost Cushing Hospital. Where the medical clinic here used to be a hospital. Now it's a clinic on post. And that's going to continue if we don't do something about it. And I couldn't just sit and watch it. And so I decided to throw my hat in the ring after I retired from the Army and do something about it. That's why I do what I do. So what am I doing? In Topeka, I've been fighting for you. I've been fighting to keep our property taxes low because that's driving people away. And it's forcing people to make decisions to leave the state. I've been fighting for, to support veterans and corrections officers, because that's the core of the people in our town that have the medical insurance, that have the benefits, that support a lot of those services that are leaving our town. I mean, I care about everybody. I want everybody to stay, but I'm focused on those folks because that's really the economic engine that keeps the services here. Obviously, the post and the prison are the engines that, keep people coming here. But those are the people that we got to hang on to. And finally, I've been fighting to bring jobs and opportunity here to Leavenworth because our kids are going to leave if there aren't jobs for them to do when they get out of school. I'm going to spend a lot of time today on property taxes because that's I think the critical issue right now. The skyrocketing property taxes are driving people out of our town. I hear it every day. When I was going around knocking on doors for municipal elections, the number of people that told me if we don't get something done about our property taxes, I'm going to be priced out of my home and I'm going to have to leave. And I'm sure that's the situation for some folks here in this room right now. I talk to people who are paying more for their property taxes now than they used to pay on their mortgage payment, property taxes, and insurance. And that's unsustainable. We are going to drive everybody out of the state. I'm gonna bore you for a second. Well, actually, it's not gonna be boring. This is gonna be the most dangerous and exciting thing you've ever seen me do at a town hall. I'm gonna do public math. Okay, so I want you to bear with me. It's not a lot, but I think it's important that we kind of proceed from a common framework. And if you, I promise this is going somewhere because I'm going to be talking about some of the policies that you've heard people talk about. I'm going to be talking about some of the policies that I'm trying to get done in Topeka to address this property tax issue. But your property taxes are made up of two things. It's made up of the value of your home, and it's made up of the mill levy, right? And every year, the property values are going up 15%. And then all these local taxing entities, they keep the mill levy flat, and they say, hey, I'm keeping your mill levy flat, I'm not raising your property taxes, but because your property taxes are the value times the mill levy, your property taxes are going up 15%, right? Now, who are these taxing entities that I'm talking about? Well, first of all, the state is a piece of your property taxes. It's not most of your property taxes. It's not even a majority or a plurality of your property taxes, but the state has a 20 mill levy and a 1.5 mill levy. And remember that, because I'm going to be talking about it again in a minute, okay? But then you've also got the county. And the county, they keep the property taxes flat every year. And this year that equaled $4 million in increases because the values went up. You've got the city. They get most of their money from the sales tax, right? And so they don't have to rely as much on the property tax. They actually lowered the mill levy this year by the same percentage that the house prices went up, which is a term you hear called revenue neutral. That's when they drop the mill levy as much as the property values go up, so that they take in exactly what they took in before. So this was, the county was plus 4 million, but the city didn't take in any more than they took in the year before, which is ideally what we'd love for every municipality to do, right? Even if they just went up with inflation 3 or 4%, which is what it is when Joe Biden ain't president, you would never hear me complaining, because they have to keep the lights on, they have to keep the roads. But 15% every year is what's killing us. It's driving people out of their homes. The biggest piece of your property tax, I'm sorry this is too low, but the biggest piece of your property taxes is the schools. The school district's mill levy is 50%-ish, depending on what school district you live in, of your property tax bill. And this year, not only did they let the assessor raise property taxes, but they increased the mill levy on top of it. So they added $2 million to their budget while they're sitting on a $13 million surplus. They got $13 million in the bank, and they still raised your property taxes $2 million here in Leavenworth School District. And if you need the numbers for other school districts, I can help you look it up after this. That's a big piece of the puzzle. Okay, that is a big piece of the puzzle. And we're not getting anywhere if we don't have folks in our local governments that are willing to hold the line, or at least hold it to inflation. So I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about this other stuff. The big thing here is your property taxes are the valuation plus the mill levy, and then we're also going to talk about the state mill levy. There's this level that we're at today, right? For the county, it's about 60 million. So this year, they let the property value go up 15%. They held the mill levy flat. And so your property taxes went up $4 million or 15%, right? So what are they going to do next year? Based on what they've done every year to this point, it's going to keep going up 15% every year, right? And that number will get bigger because it's 15% of the new total, right? Some of you have probably got a letter in the mail with your tax bill that was paid for with your tax money that said, this isn't our fault, this is the state's fault, because the state is sitting on this LABTR money, right? Local ad valorem tax relief, okay? And I want to talk about that, and that's why I got to do math, okay? They just went to Topeka on, I believe it was Wednesday or Thursday, because there's a bill up there that basically says the state's going to pay back this money, right? Going to pay local ad valorem. It hasn't been paid for 20 years, okay? And there's a reason, and I'm going to show you here. That's why we were doing math. I'm going to show you why we haven't why it hadn't been paid. Now, none of us were in government. I say we. I wasn't a state representative 20 years ago. I was, trying not to get my butt blown off in Iraq 20 years ago. But give or take, I won't tell you all the time. And neither were any of the county commissioners, I think. But the state has been paying this LABTR for 20 years, and this is why. So if you are going to pay every county in the entire state, all 105 counties in the state of Kansas, the LABTR, the price tag comes to $500 million with a B, $500 million, okay? And you take that money, you write it, and that's every year, right? Every year, you're going to have to give $500 million back to the counties, okay? In Leavenworth, that comes out to maybe $4 million, okay? Rough math, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. We could quibble about how much it is. For Leavenworth County, for Leavenworth County, $4 million. Okay, so we pay that money next year, okay? Let's just say theoretically. I'm going to vote against it. I'm going to show you why. But let's say that we paid that money. Okay, so we have a new baseline forever that's LABTR, right? Because we're giving them $500 million a year forever of your tax money to every county in the state, theoretically, so that they won't raise your property taxes anymore. Okay? Well, you can see that takes up 1 year's increase. So next year, if we pay $500 million every year forever, they won't have to raise your property taxes one time. But then the next year, because their budget goes up $4 million every year, what are they going to do? They're going to have to raise taxes again, because we're not going to give them, we're not going to increase by $500 million every year. The state would be broke in 3 years. We wouldn't have enough money to keep the lights on, in Topeka, which might be a good thing, by the way. But yeah, we ain't going to be able to run the state government because all the money be going to counties. This will go up, and that's what county commissioners and people tell you. This will go up, but it's only going to go up at the rate of inflation, because sales tax goes up as more things get more expensive, because that's what the LABTR money is sales tax. So this LABTR is going to go up like this. If we get rid of Joe Biden, God willing, it'll be like 2% a year, because that'll be the inflation. But meanwhile, the county budget's going up 15% every year. So this is not going to fix the skyrocketing property taxes. If they used it to not increase property taxes, 1 year, they would not raise your property taxes. And then following years, they go right back to raising your property taxes. Meanwhile, the state's on the hook for $500 million forever. Okay, so that is not a solution. This is my favorite solution, okay? Okay, I said that property taxes are the value, which is going up every year at 15%. Plus the mill levies that right now they're saying they're keeping them flat. They're saying, I didn't raise your taxes. Talk to the property assessor. He raised your taxes. So if we can stop the value of your house from going up by 15% a year, then if they keep the mill levy flat, then your property taxes won't go up, right? There's a constitutional amendment that passed the Senate last year. I'm telling you, this is my favorite solution. Now I'm going to give you my honest assessment of how likely it is to happen. There's a constitutional amendment that passed the Senate last year that would have capped valuation increases at 4%. I would like 0. Okay, if it was up to me, the number would be 0. If you bought your house at this price, that's what your house is worth until you sell it. If you sell it, the next person is going to have to pay property taxes at whatever price they pay the house. To me, that's fair. Okay, to me, that's fair. But the constitutional amendment requires 2/3 majority in both houses. The lowest number they could get through the Senate was 4%, which is still a whole ton better than 15%. So that's a good start. Okay, so if that is in the House now, it's the House's turn to vote on it. If that comes to the floor, Pat Proctor is going to vote for that. If Lance Neely gets up from his seat, I'm going to vote for it twice because I'm going to reach over there and push his button too. I am voting for this, okay? Because what it will force the municipalities to do is either affirmatively raise your taxes themselves, in which case they can't wiggle out from under it. That's how it's going to be. They're going to have to be accountable for what they did, or they're going to have to hold the mill levy flat, and they're going to have to learn how to live within a 4% budget increase every year. Now, what would that do to our taxes? Instead of it going up $4 million every year because of the 15% increase, the max that it would be able to go up is the 4%, right? Which would at least slow the rise of your property taxes. Okay, it ain't a perfect solution, but it is. It will at least cap the increase in your values, unless the municipalities decide to try to get even more money, in which case they can't hide and say the assessor did it to you, that they did it to you, right? And then we get to hold them accountable at the ballot box. Okay, so I told you I was going to be honest with you, okay? If it's coming to the floor, I'm voting for it, but right now, I don't know if it's coming to the floor. The reason is because of the Kansas Farm Bureau, they are against that. The reason they're against it, because when you get out into those rural counties that have more cows than people, that are 1,000, 1,500 people and a whole bunch of farmland, they're afraid that those county commissioners, since they can't get their property taxes from the housing because it's capped, they're going to put it on the backs of the farms. Okay, and the Republican Party in the House, we have a large contingent of rural legislators that represent rural districts, and represent more cows than people. And so that's going to be a fight. Okay, I told you I'm up there to fight for you, so rest assured I'm fighting. Okay, like whenever we get a room, Pat Proctor's talking about this, because I think that is the best solution to fixing this problem. Okay, but I got a fight on my hands. I'm being honest with you. I ain't gonna lie to you. I ain't gonna BS you. I got a fight on my hands getting that done, but I'm working on it. Okay, and I've been fighting for that ever since I've been up there, and we're as close as we've ever been. We at least got it through one house this when we started the year, which has never happened before. All right, so that's my favorite solution. What other solutions are there? Okay, I told you that the mill levy was state, county, city, and schools, right? And schools are the biggest chunk of it. But the state has a 20 mill levy and a 1.5 mill levy. The 20 mills goes to education. You pay your property taxes, the state takes their 20 mills, and then they distribute it using this crazy formula to all the schools in the state. And don't ask me what that formula is, because it's made to be inscrutable, right? It's made to be complicated so they can keep showering money on the school districts. The other 1.5 mills goes to other stuff for the state. But that 20 mills, it's not gone down in forever. And I told you that the valuation's going up 15% a year. So your property taxes to the state, because the value's going up 15% a year, it's going up. Your property tax state's going up 15% every year, right? So the most likely thing to happen, I'm going to talk about these next two are the most likely to happen. And I want to leave plenty of room for questions, so I'm going to talk forever. The most likely thing to happen is we are going to drop this number. Okay? Either 2 mills, or I would love 10 mills, okay? If Pat Proctor gets to vote and gets to pick the number, Pat Proctor gets to pick the number, it's going to be 20 mills, okay? So, but we're going to drop this number. the Speaker of the House in an interview the other day said 2 mills. I've heard 4 mills thrown around. Whatever they're going to drop it, Pat Proctor's voting for it. And again, if Lance Ely gets up, goes back through him, I'm voting for it twice, okay? Because I'm going to push his button. That will instantly drop the property taxes of every homeowner in the state 20 mills, right? Or 2 mills, 4 mills, whatever the number we go down, right? So that's instant relief, right? And that's forever, right? Because every year, instead of 20 mills, we'll be hitting you at 18 mills. That won't fix the 15% a year valuation, but it will at least take some money off your property tax bill, okay? And that's very likely to happen. I will be surprised if we don't get that done this year. Okay, there's another law that, there's all these tax laws that are kind of like a patchwork quilt. People have been sewing things to them for years, trying to fix this, fix that. But in the law, there is an exemption for the state mill levy, right? So on your house, if your house is valued at $100,000 a year, $40,000 is exempted from that 20 mills and that 1.5 mills, the state's mill levy, right? So the first $40,000 in your house, you're not paying state property taxes on, right? There are proposals to double or even more that exemption. So instead of not paying property taxes to the state on your first 40,000, you wouldn't pay property taxes on your first 80,000 or 100,000 or whatever. I'm going to go for the biggest number I can get here, people. If I can get 10 million exemption, get 10 million exemption. Nobody will pay the state anything. Okay, I'm good with that. That we sent the governor that bill last year, and she vetoed it, and we didn't have enough votes to override the veto. Okay, Democrats, when they vote, the Democratic House Caucus, they lock arms. I got some former legislators here nodding. They lock arms. They vote as a single block on whatever they're going to vote, yes or no. Republicans, you get 2 Republicans in a room, you got 5 opinions, right? We can't agree on nothing. So we have a hard time overriding vetoes because we got a super majority plus 1 vote. That 1 vote, he never votes with us. He always votes with the Democrats. He's a former school superintendent. You draw your own conclusions. But those other 84, we're a cantankerous bunch of people, and we never agree on nothing. So it's very hard to override or veto when we need every vote. And sometimes we can. We overrode or veto on fairness in women's sports. A couple other big. A woman is a woman and a man is a man in the state law. Those things we were able to override the veto, but on the tax bill last year we weren't able to override the veto. This is very likely to pass because last week she gave her State of the State address, right? And in her State of the State address, she gave this long list of things that she wanted to cut in the taxes, and they're all the things that we sent her last year that she vetoed, including this. Okay, she said 100,000. I'm going to take her up on it. She's going to raise the exemption to 100,000. Sold to the lady with bad haircut. I'm going to cut that out of the video, by the way. Another thing that she talked about was, she talked about cutting that or lowering that exemption. But she talked about taking the food sales tax to 0. We sent her that last year. We sent her that in 2019, and she vetoed it, or the food sales tax would already be 0. But if she'll sign it, we're sending it to her. Okay, this is very likely to happen. An increase in the exemption, and maybe she didn't talk about lowering the state mill levy because that's education money, and she don't want us touching education money, but. Those are the 2 things most likely to happen. Now, there was a Supreme Court decision a few years ago that prevents us from lowering the amount of money that we can give to the schools, okay? So if we reduce that mill levy, 2 mills, 4 mills, which is, I'm doing public math, watch out, that's 10 to 20% of your state mill levy, right? If we lower that, we're going to have to replace that money out of income tax receipts. Okay, so it's shifted from income from homeowners, just homeowners, to everybody who makes an income in Kansas, but it will at least lower your property taxes. Okay, but we have to replace that money. Okay, so that is everybody's taxes. Okay, and I know I've been talking a lot about disabled veteran property tax relief, which I'm getting ready to talk about in depth, but I'm trying to lower everybody's taxes, okay, because I don't want anybody leaving the state, and I especially don't want anybody leaving Leavenworth because they can't afford their home. Okay, so I am working on those things that I just described to you. Those are the things that I'm fighting for you, and I can answer questions. I'm going to talk for about another 10 minutes about veterans, and then I'll open the floor and I'll answer questions. But disabled veterans, I have been working for 2 years on, and I want to explain why. Because I get the email. I mean, this is not a critique of my neighbors. It's a valid question. You're concentrating on disabled veterans. What about everybody else? Well, I explained to you what I'm doing for everybody else, but I want to answer that question. So that's my beautiful wife, by the way, behind the bar, Ari. Yes, that's clearly the brains of the operation. Me and my wife own this restaurant, right? And so when we're going to, I'm done doing public math. Okay, when we're going to advertise, we put our advertisements with people that we think might eat Thai food, right? I don't put my advertisement where McDonald's puts their advertisement, because a lot of people eat McDonald's are never coming through that door because they think this or they think too spicy, or it's just I was a meat and potatoes kid. I grew up in the Midwest. Starvation's a strong motivator, so she convinced me to eat her food. Now I love it, right? But I'm going to advertise where the people who I think might eat Thai food are, right? I'm trying to keep people here in Leavenworth and in Kansas, but I'm also trying to get more people here, right? Because I don't want to just keep the population flat and stop the decline. I want to increase the population, because more people, more money means more services. We can get our hospital back. We can get all these things done. Increase the tax base, so the county ain't trying to squeeze blood out of the turnip. We've got more people who own homes, right? So disabled veterans are separating from Fort Leavenworth every year by the hundreds. Okay? Every year, veterans leave the service at Fort Leavenworth. Some of them are, old broken down colonels like I was. Some of them are, first term soldiers that work at the disciplinary barracks that are leaving because they finished their term of service and going to go to school or whatever. A lot of those veterans come out with disability ratings, because this job is hard on your body and it's hard on your soul, especially for those folks that went to Iraq or Afghanistan, got really broken down wearing 90 pounds of body armor, getting blown up in vehicles, and walk around in the Iraqi sun. It's hard on your body. So a lot of veterans leave with disabilities. If a veteran has 50% or more disability when they separate, they're going to get that disability check. If they're retiring, they're going to get that retirement check. All their medical care is going to be paid for by the Veterans Administration, or Veterans Affairs. However, that hospital can't provide most of the services. I just had surgery on my hand the other day, a couple weeks ago, which is why my shake's kind of strange. I apologize, but it's still recovering. I didn't go to the VA hospital to do that because they don't have a hand surgeon. They sent me to KU Med to have that surgery done. VA paid, the federal government paid for that surgery. That payment went into the Kansas healthcare system. That's just one example, right? All of the medical care that all these disabled veterans are getting, a lot of it, probably a majority of it, is on the local economy in the civilian healthcare. So those disabled veterans are propping up our civilian healthcare system. If we keep them, okay? If we keep them. Those checks that they get from the VA for their disability, I heard the other day from he used to be the senior veteran service officer for the VFW. They gather up something like $900 million in benefits they get for disabled veterans every year separating from Kansas. 500 million of those dollars, a $500 million goes to Texas, Florida, Alaska, other states because the tax structure is better. Okay? Those states, 18 states around the nation, do not charge disabled veterans property tax. And so if we want to compete and we want to keep those veterans, we've got to offer similar benefits to what those states offer. So why was I talking about Thai food a second ago when I was talking about advertising? Those people are leaving the military. They are currently in the market for a place to live. Okay? So if you want to have people live in Leavenworth, you've got to market to people that are looking for a place to live. And everybody that separates from that post is in the market for a place to live. And so if we can make Kansas appealing, they can just move down the street instead of packing up a semi and going to Florida, going to Texas. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, okay? It's great for the veterans that are here. I want to hang on to the veterans that are here. Don't feel insulted. I'm a veteran too. Don't feel insulted. I'm not saying that I don't want to help you and don't want to keep you here, but for the long-term survival of Leavenworth, we gotta keep the separating disabled veterans here. Just some of them. If we can just convince some of them to stay here, that will be good for Kansas. That'll be good for Leavenworth. There is a hearing on that bill that I sponsored last year next week. So last year I sponsored House Bill 2036. It's disabled veteran property tax relief. It's comparable to Texas, Florida. I think maybe it's a little bit better because I've discovered in legislation, you ask for the world, and if you're lucky, you get New Jersey, right? So I ask for the world. I'm willing to negotiate as long as we're competitive with Texas and Florida when it's all over. That bill passed the House 123-1. All the Leavenworth legislators co-sponsored with me. A good portion of the Veterans Caucus co-sponsored with me. But we didn't get it passed in time to get it heard in the Senate. And so it's being taken up. We just started the session this week. Next week it's being taken up in the Senate Tax Committee. Okay? You remember your schoolhouse rock. It's got to get out of the committee, then it can go to the floor, and then we're going to work out the differences. Okay? In the off season, because we're a part-time legislature, we ended in May, I heard from Geary County and Leavenworth County that they did not like the bill because it was going to cost them a lot of money, right? Because the property tax that's exempted, they don't collect, and they're not going to, and they got to keep the lights on, got to keep the roads clear and all that stuff. So in the off season, I went to the Kansas Legislative Research Division. I'm still under time. I went to Kansas Legislative Research Division, and I had them run the numbers for the entire state. We got the VAs. The VA knows where the checks go, right? So they know who's 30%, who's 40%, and where they live in the state. And we went for the whole county, and we figured out how much this bill is going to cost every county. And what we discovered is it's going to cost Geary, as it was written, it would cost Geary County 16% of their property tax revenue, which is a big hit. It would have cost Riley County and Leavenworth County about 6% each. And then the rest of the state was like, most of the state was less than 1%. Everybody was less than 2%. It was like 1 point something for those counties with some veterans. But most of the veterans that are here live in Leavenworth, Riley, and Geary. And so in the off season, I drafted a amendment that would allow those three counties. I think the way I wrote it was like a threshold. I didn't say those three counties, but I wrote a threshold that only those three counties would qualify for. So they could go to the state and get reimbursed for the disabled veteran property tax relief that's in the bill. Also, any city or school that was going to lose 3% or more could go to the state and get their money back that they're losing to this exemption, right? So I addressed their issue, right? They didn't have any, that was their concern, was they weren't going to get that money. So I wrote an amendment so they would get that money. In December, the Leavenworth County had a breakfast for all the legislators. And I came and I presented, I didn't have the written word yet, but I presented the concept to them. And then they said, well, you guys don't pay this LAVTR, you're not going to pay that either, and we're going to get left holding the bag. So I'm like, 1 second, I got something for that too. So I went back to the amendment and I added what's called a non-severability clause. It says right in the amendment that will go into the state statute, if we stop paying the fund, veterans stop getting the benefit. Because there isn't a legislator up there who's going to stop paying that fund if it means that all the disabled veterans all of a sudden are going to have their property taxes go up, right? Because there'll be pitchforks and torches outside everybody's house. So there ain't a legislator up there that's not going to pay the fund. And so I basically put a gun to the head of the legislature in the law that says, you're going to have to pay this fund, right? I took the amendment to Geary County. Geary County loves it. They're going to actually testify next week as proponents in support of the bill. They had the county commission. They passed a resolution to write a letter. They're submitting a letter, and one of their commissioners, who's a disabled veteran, Alex Tyson, he's actually going to come up and testify in favor of the bill. Not sure what Riley County is going to do. I know one of the commissioners is in support. The other two, I'm not sure where they sit, but I went and I talked to them. I went there, I showed them the amendment, answered their questions. But then Leavenworth County, God bless them, they're going to go on Wednesday and they're going to testify as opponents against the bill. Okay, they've written a letter, and their justification, to the extent it is they don't believe the non-severability clause. They don't want the money. Okay, I'm not going to look into people's hearts or people's minds and tell you why they're opposing the bill, but that's what they said on camera. They said a bunch of other things. I encourage you to go watch the YouTube video. It's kind of shocking, but that's one of the insinuations, was that the money wouldn't be paid. Who in this room is from Leavenworth County? Okay. I am too. Those folks work for us. If you don't want them to go up there and tell the state senate that Leavenworth County doesn't want this bill, that you don't want this bill, then please contact the commissioners. Okay? We have 1 working day left, because Monday is Martin Luther King Day. We have 1 working day left, Tuesday, to convince them to not do what they're planning to go up there and do. Now, will they kill the bill? That's not up to me. That's up to the members of the state tax committee. But it certainly doesn't help to have one of the counties. Now, granted, they're not the county that's going to lose the most money. No county's going to lose money, but they're 6% disabled veteran property tax revenue, as opposed to Geary County, which is 16%. So I hope it won't kill the bill, but it certainly ain't going to help. Okay, so if you don't want your elected representatives going to Topeka and telling the Senate that you don't want disabled veteran property tax relief, please make a phone call or send an email, please. Okay. So I told you I'd leave plenty of time for questions. The last thing I'll say is a paid political announcement. Yesterday, my Democrat opponent filed to run against me. So I'm going to have a re-election campaign. I'm up for re-election in November. If you are able in any way to help, when we get back into campaign season this summer, I probably should make this pitch when it's 4 degrees outside. But if you're able to help knock doors, if you're able to put a sign in your yard, if you're able to, if you're able to support financially, there's some envelopes there. But if you want me to keep fighting for you on these issues, I got to get reelected. If you send a Democrat up there, they're a no vote. They're just a no. They don't get to carry bills. If they put their name on a bill to sponsor, it doesn't go anywhere because they don't want to give Democrats a win. It ain't right, but it's how it is. If you want me to keep fighting for you, I need your support. And so with that, I'm going to shut up and answer any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
Okay, you talked about Leavenworth, Gary, and Riley County. What about our friends down where you teach school at in Sedgwick County?
So I was surprised. I thought the number would be really big because of McConnell Air Force Base, but it's just such a big town. It's the biggest city in Kansas. because, you know, Johnson County's all broken up into little cities. And there's so many other people who live there that disabled veterans are not a large percentage. It's less than 2%. So I don't know the exact number.
Wichita was the big one that turned around and made a big stink about the disabled veterans having to recertify for our disabled.
Yeah, they have a lot of veterans there, but as a percentage of the total property tax revenue, I don't know if it's that they don't own that many houses, or if it's that I think it's just the sheer number of people there and the sheer number of rooftops. Disabled veterans are not, it's less than 2%. I could get you the number, I just don't have it off the top of my head. I promise I'll have it in time for the testimony on Tuesday when I get asked the question. But yeah, it's not a big percentage.
Okay.
It's a lot of people, it's just not a big percentage of the total population. That's a good question though. I'm sure I'm gonna get it on Tuesday too. Yes, sir.
Two questions, sir. One, is the disabled veteran retired, so I'm really supportive of law, you know, for disabled vets. Thank you.
It's honor, sir.
What I think, and I've got a degree in history, not mathematics, so,
Me too.
Yeah. What I think you told me is I'm paying for education twice. I'm paying it at the state level and I'm paying it at the local level.
Oh, no,
I don't
no.
have any kids in the school system.
No. You're paying for education 3 times.
Oh, that's
Because
special.
you're
Thank
paying for it at the state, at the school, at the state 20 mill levy. You're paying for it at the school district at their mill levy. And then we're also taking some money out of the state general fund that the Supreme Court says we have to give them. And the Supreme Court's saying that we have to give them $100 million more every year in perpetuity to keep.
Real quick, but back to your disabled veterans.
Yes, sir.
Do you believe the governor will sign this bill if it comes to it?
She has said that she is in support of this bill, and if we bring it to her desk, she'll sign it. Now, if it gets packaged with something else that she doesn't like, you know, that's the danger. That's the danger. But she has said she supports this
Let
measure.
it go, or are you guys gonna fight with each other in this bill?
So, I get asked this question a lot, if you'll allow me the divergence. Why is it that bills get stuck together? Why don't we just send every bill individually? By the Constitution, Kansas has a part-time legislature, which I think is a wonderful thing, because it means when I'm not there, I have to work doing something else alongside my neighbors, you know, and I'm gonna get an earful if I do what they want, right? And I have to earn a living just like all my neighbors, and then I go there. It's not a profession, it's a public service, right? The downside of that is we have very little time. And a lot of times, a bill will pass one house and not pass the other. Like, for instance, disabled veteran property tax. It passed the House, but it didn't make it through the Senate. So at the end, the two houses meet, like the chairman, vice chairman, and minority leader of the Senate Tax Committee, and the chairman, vice chairman, and minority leader of the House Committee. They sit in what's called a conference committee, and they go through all the bills that we passed. And if they think it's a good idea, but it only made it through one house, they can stick it in one of those packages, one of those bills that's a bundle. That's why it happens. Would I like us to both vote in each house on every bill? Yes. But I'm not gonna not give Kansas property tax relief because it didn't get a hearing in the Senate if I can get it through.
Pat, just to add on to that, so USD 453 and 207 both get money from the federal government because of the post, right?
Yes, they do.
So how does that play in?
Okay, so that's a great question too, which makes me even madder about the property tax
Yeah,
increase.
exactly.
So last year, I fought. There's a gentleman. His name's Perry Wiggins. He's a retired lieutenant general. I worked for him as his chief of plans when he was a 1-star and the commander of Big Red 1 in Fort Riley. And he's now the governor's military advisor, right? Now that he's retired. And he had been fighting for years because Kansas was one of the only states that if a school kid got that federal, you know, that if a school got that federal aid for that kid because he was a military child, you know, child of a service member, the state would claw the money back and the school wouldn't get the state money for that kid, right? So Joe Wiggins came to me. I did not know it was a thing that was happening. He came to me. I'm like, yeah, we need to get that fixed, right? And so we went around, we lobbied. I talked to the chair of the education committee, and we got that. That's no longer the case. We got that fixed last year, and that's $13 million to schools in Leavenworth County that we weren't getting. So Leavenworth County is getting $13 million of education money from the federal government and not having it clawed back from the state like they used to. But yet, Leavenworth schools still raise property taxes $2 million this year, while sitting on a $13 million surplus.
Yeah. So that's why I asked.
I'll get you in a second, I apologize. Yeah, Terry Wilson?
Would you briefly go through the 11 bills that the elections committee just put up?
I can't briefly go through 11 bills, but I can give you the gist of what we're working on this year. So, I'm the chair of the elections committee. That's why people keep asking me elections questions. Bringing tax relief, taking care of veterans and corrections officers, and bringing jobs here. That's my job, and that's what I'm focused on. But I ain't gonna lie to you. My passion is elections, and the reason my passion is elections is because our country's in a crisis right now. When I'm out knocking doors, and some of the other kind of local candidates will tell you the same thing. When I'm knocking on doors, the number of doors that I go to where the person answers and says, I'm not voting anymore because elections are rigged, that is a fundamental threat. That is an existential threat to our way of government and our way of life. If people give up on elections, we ain't gonna have a country left. So I am laser focused when I'm in the elections committee, not doing all these other things that I'm working on for you, on restoring voter confidence. Okay? There are people out there, and I'm just going to say it, and it's going on the video. There are people out there who are professional election deniers, and their job is to sow doubt in the election system to profit. They have podcasts, they have newsletters that are charged. They are professional election deniers. Now, that's not to say that there are not security issues that we need to address. And that's where I'm focused. I'm focused on the real security issues. I don't know of any of them being exploited, but when I'm not here working for my wife in the restaurant, I'm not in the legislature, I'm a professor in the Homeland Security program at Wichita State. And the first principle of Homeland Security is get to the left of the boom. You don't wait till the explosion to fix the security problem, right? And the same is true with elections. If you know there's a vulnerability, you plug the vulnerability before it gets exploited, not after you can prove it, okay, that it's been exploited. Big vulnerability, not a vulnerability, but a way to exploit the system I don't know that it's been used yet, but let's not wait for it to happen. Right now, some of our largest counties, when they do an audit of the election, right, so we have the election, and then they go back and they double check the numbers. I'm an artilleryman, we would have the computer calculate the solution, but then we would always have a dual independent check to make sure that the math was right before we sent the round down range, so it didn't land on one of our guys, it landed on one of their guys, right? We do the same thing with elections. We run the election, and then we take the ballots and we look at them to make sure that the paper ballots, because every vote that gets cast, whether you type on the machine or you use an ink pen, it produces a paper ballot that you put in the counter. They look at the paper ballot and make sure that the number of votes in the paper ballots matches the number on the machine. Some counties are not using the paper ballot. They're using a scan of the paper ballot made by the counting machine. That's not a dual independent check. So we're going to change that this year, God willing, if I can get it through both houses, and they're going to audit the paper ballots. Another one, we continue to take ballots for 3 days after the election is over, mail-in ballots. We continue to count them as long as they're postmarked by election day. If they are received by the clerk within 3 days after the election, we count them. Well, first of all, you want to sow a lack of voter confidence, change the results of the election 3 days after the election's over. That's a good way to make everybody think nonsense is going on. But it's also disenfranchising voters. In the off season, I went around to see election officers all over the state, and what I heard at least one election officer say was she was not counting votes after election day because they came in without a postmark. that voter didn't do anything wrong. That voter, theoretically got it in the mail before election day, and it showed up 3 days after the election, which right now by law means it should be counted. But if it doesn't have a postmark, they're not allowed to count it, right? Because you don't know. They could have mailed it the day after the election, so it has to have a postmark. So one of the things I'm going to be trying to do is move the whole timeline back so election night is election night. If you don't get your vote in by election night, it ain't going to get counted. It's just cleaner. They don't have to have a postmark anymore because we know, unless you send it back in a time machine, we know that it was cast before the election was over. So that's another thing I'm going to be doing. We had a really big ethics reform bill, campaign finance rules, and I'm not going to bore everybody with this, but I'll just say that I am always going to err on the side of free speech. And when a candidate's out talking, or people are out advocating for the candidate, or somebody's writing a check to me so that I can communicate, that's a person exercising their First Amendment right to free speech. And so there were some problems with the law, that vagaries that were hindering that ability for people to speak freely, and we cleaned up a lot of that, but there's going to be some more bills. We had an interim committee. It was a great discussion. We had a lot of professors from all over the world and candidates. The ethics commission director came, and I think we're going to get some more cleanup to make sure that we're protecting people's free speech rights, but also their due process rights. Because the way the ethics commission was set up before, the ethics commission was the cop, the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury, and the executioner. And that's not, you have to have an adversarial system. And so we're going to be cleaning some more of that up. Thank you very much for bringing the way.